Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. A number of announcements to make. First, the lunch is sponsored this week by 3 different sponsors. I want to thank them. And Laylo is sponsoring in honor of the IDF. Michael and Hadassah May are sponsoring in honor of Israel. Thank you very much. And Jeff and Lori Goldschin, may Hashem bless and keep safe our brothers and sisters in Israel. And may the rest of the hostages be returned home in good health. And may Hashem be with Israel's fighting men and women to eliminate our enemies. Amen.
Last minute development in honor of Norman Lear being arrested.
In memory of Norman Lear, who passed away this morning, I believe. Some other announcements. Hanukkah is tomorrow evening. It's a very important holiday every year, but more so this year than ever before, because we have to respond by showing and demonstrating our Jewish pride. We can't hide it. Many places we're talking about, do we put up the menorah this year? Are we afraid to? The opposite. More menorahs than ever before. More public celebrations than ever before. Any city, any mall, any shopping center that's been wavering, we have put tremendous pressure on to make sure, hold firm, stand proud. Don't buckle, don't give in to anti-Semitism. That's the only response, is to stand very, very strong. I want to thank my council members here of Agoura Hills, the mayor and the mayor pro tem, and all members of the city council. We're going to usher in Hanukkah tomorrow at 4:30 with the lighting of the menorah at the Agoura Hills City Hall. And everyone's invited to join. Every council member will be there. The newly appointed mayor, who was appointed last night, Elise Buckley Weber, will be there to help us bring in the holiday of Hanukkah. This council has stood firm against any anti-Semitism in our city and has made this a wonderful place for the Jewish community to prosper and thrive. And we're honored that they have invited us every single year since 1989 to City Hall to kindle the menorah. And I invite you all to join. Tomorrow, 4:30, the Agoura Hills City Hall will usher in the holiday of Hanukkah. There's 2 other festivals that I want to mention. One will take place Monday, December 11th, and that will take place at the Shops Shopping Center. If you know what Hummus Lali is, it's right there, right outside Hummus Lali. That's our newest kosher restaurant in the Conejo Valley. So if you want to come a little bit earlier and have a falafel, the best falafel outside of Tel Aviv, just come a little bit earlier or stay a little bit later. But from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, join us outside. We have a wonderful program for you, the lighting of the Conejo's largest menorah. There's going to be a show for the children. There's going to be a concert with Israeli solidarity songs. There'll be a rally for Israel, and the menorah will be kindled. We have the grandmother of one of the hostages will be joining us. She'll be telling us about her grandson, who's right now held hostage in Gaza. And we're going to pass through with the torch of unity and hope for all of us to join together with her and give her the hope and the strength that she and her family needs, and the blessings that she and her family needs, that indeed very soon she should be reunited with her grandson. Better yet, before Monday, her grandson should be released, and he should be able to be celebrating Hanukkah together with the family. So that's this Monday, December 11th, 5:30. We look forward to having all of you there. Wednesday evening, we're going to be at the event center. The event center is right here in Agoura Hills. We have the Hanukkah Wonderland that will take place. There will be a buffet dinner that will be served. There will be crafts. There will be Judah the Maccabee to take pictures with your children, with your grandchildren. There will be a mad science show. Lots of fun. Wednesday, 4:30. It starts at 4:30. It'll go on for a few hours. And there too, there will be a very dramatic and emotional menorah kindling that will take place, together with Maor and Daniela Sassi Perez. Maor and Daniela, together with Daniela's father and members of their family, were at that concert in Israel on October the 7th when the terrorist attack. Unfortunately, her relatives and her father did not survive the attack, and Maor and Daniela were shot upon. They survived only by hiding under the bodies of their own relatives for 7 hours. They will be joining us for a very emotional menorah kindling that will be this Wednesday, December 13th, at the event center. For that, we do need you to make reservations in advance. We did have once we put out this flyer, went out yesterday, a sponsor called us and said, I want everyone to participate in this dramatic and emotional menorah kindling. So he's subsidizing most of the cost. So the cost has been drastically reduced. It's now $30 for an entire family, depending no matter how many kids you have. And if it's just you and your wife, it's $10 a person, and that includes dinner. So please do join with us, make reservations in advance, because once it sells out, we won't be able to have any more people. That's Wednesday, December the 13th. We're also going to have a menorah car parade an hour before the event center. So at 3:30, if you'd like to decorate your car with Israel Pride and Holiday Pride, you could read about that in the brochure that's in front of you. Lots coming your way for Hanukkah. Again, my theme for Hanukkah to the entire Jewish community, whether in the Conejo Valley or anywhere in the world, is this year Hanukkah, be a Maccabee. Stand up proud, stand up strong, don't be intimidated. There have been times in our history where we went into hiding. We have an entire history of Marranos who hid their identity because of fear of anti-Semitism. We have to respond differently today, and it has to be a Maccabee. So this Hanukkah, I urge every single one, wherever you live, be a Maccabee. Put that menorah out there. Celebrate Hanukkah in a very public-like way. It's been another difficult week for us as the Jewish people, as we start now hearing the stories from the hostages that were released, and hearing what they've been through and the torture that they've been through. Whereas at first Hamas, using their propaganda machine, tried to show, look, they're all smiling as they were leaving. They're even waving to us. And we find out later that they were forced to do that. We find out that they were drugged before they were released. We find out that they took their first shower since being held captive, just an hour before they were released. We find different stories that we're hearing, and it horrifies us to know that this is taking place and the world is still questioning Israel. You have Emily Hand, who was 9 years old, who now believes that she was in captivity for over a year. That's what her mind is telling her. She remembers being taught the words, be quiet, in Arabic, because that's what they were yelling at her the entire time. She wasn't allowed to say a word. When she's home with her father now, she only whispers because she's afraid to speak up, because the entire time she was threatened that she can't speak. So she can only whisper. You have 12-year-old Eitan Yahalomi, who says that he was threatened anytime he spoke up. A gun was pointed at his head. He's 12 years old, and this is what he remembers, guns being pointed at his head. He was forced to watch the videotape that Hamas took themselves of the butchering of babies, of cutting the babies' heads off, of torturing people. He was forced to watch this videotape day in and day out. That's how they treated their hostages, and yet they're trying to show the world that they were wonderful hosts to the Jewish hostages that they had there. Eitan was brought, when he was first kidnapped, he was brought to a place where in Gaza, a playground of other kids, and the other kids from Gaza were encouraged to beat him up. And that's how his welcome to Gaza, that was his welcoming day to Gaza. We heard from Alma Avram. She's now in the ICU. She's 84 years old. Her family begged the Red Crescent that she cannot survive without her medication. All they wanted from the Red Cross of Gaza was take the medication from her and pass it along at least so that she can have her medication. They refused her. And she went all these days without her medication. She's now in the ICU in Israel fighting for her life. We can go on and on and on. But just so that we are clear with the understanding that what you're facing is a propaganda machine that's trying to influence the entire world to make them look as something that they're not. We know the truth. The truth is that they are monsters. They're evil. They are the Nazis of today. And what Israel is doing to eradicate them is something that is a favor to the entire world. It's necessary for Israel's survival, but it's also necessary for the world. Just yesterday, a report came out that one of the hostages were being held in an attic. He was being held in an attic in the Gaza, and the one that was holding this particular hostage was a teacher in Gaza that was on the UN payroll. So they're being, by UNRWA, that's the United Nations group that's there to help the citizens of Gaza, on the payroll of the United Nations, which your taxpayers support, is someone that was holding one of our hostages. So the outrage just increases every single day. What is so shocking is we keep hearing these words, ethnic cleansing, right? That we're guilty of ethnic cleansing, we're guilty of this, we're guilty of that. And sometimes when you hear something over and over and over, you start wondering, well, maybe Israel was guilty. Maybe this was Palestinian land. Maybe this was a Palestinian state. Know your own facts. There's a wonderful book I always suggest. It's called From Time Immemorial. Read the book. It's based all in facts, not written by a Jew, not written by an Israeli, but gives you all the facts of the Middle East, Israel, Jordan, how this came about, dating back to the 1700s, to the 1800s. Know your history yourself so that you can respond. I know this is a class on the chosen people and Book of Deuteronomy, and I am going to get to it just in a minute. But I want to share some numbers with you, okay? We talk about ethnic cleansing. We talk about, like, the Jews came in and they pushed all the Arabs out. Well, let's be factual, okay? I want to compare dates. I want to compare two dates. 1948, when the modern day Israel is established, 2023 today. Okay, and let's just put it out there in all honesty. In 1948, there were 63,550 Jews living in Egypt. There were large Egyptian communities, Jewish communities, synagogues. 63,550 Jews lived in Egypt in 1948. There are 3 today. Where are the Jews of Egypt?
America, Israel.
Not in Egypt, right? In Syria, in 1948, there were 40,000 Jews that lived in Syria. A large Jewish population, synagogues, Jewish traditions celebrated. There are 0 Jews in Syria today. Where are the Jews of Syria? They're anywhere but not in Syria. There were 100,000 Jews in Iran in 1948. There are 8,500 today. Where are the Jews of Iran? They're in California. They're in New York. They're in Israel. They're all over, but you know where they're not? They're not in Iran. There were 150,000 Jews in Iraq in 1948. 150,000 Jews lived in Iraq. Iraq, where are your Jews today? They're not there. There are 4 identifiable Jews living in Iraq today. 4 out of 150,000. You want to talk about ethnic cleansing? You want to talk about full populations that were moved out of their homeland, so to say, where they lived for hundreds of years?
Thousands.
Lebanon had 20,000 Jews in 1948. There are 29 today. Morocco, get this number. 260,000 Jews lived in Morocco in 1948. That's over 250,000 Jews that lived in Morocco. There are about 2,000 today. What happened to the Jews of Morocco? Everywhere in the world, but only 2,000 remaining in Morocco.
I'm here.
You're from Morocco, in Agura Hills. Welcome. In 1948, Yemen had 55,000 Jews living in Yemen. Where are the Jews of Yemen today? There's 1 identifiable Jew living in Yemen today. Algeria, 140,000 Jews lived in Algeria in 1948. There's 200 today. Let's put it out there, the world. You want to talk about land that we took? Where are all these Jewish communities? What happened to their properties? What happened to their synagogues? What happened to their schools? What happened to their butcher shops? 140,000 Jews lived in Algeria in 1948. The world doesn't want to hear facts from us. They want to post TikToks. They want to post little messages that are false, that are propaganda. They want to show us hostages leaving waving. They don't want truth. There were 38,000 Jews living in Libya in 1948. There's not a single Jew in Libya today. Tunisia had 105,000 Jews in 1948. There's less than 1,000 today. And by the way, in Tunisia and Morocco where we still have 2,000, in Tunisia where we have 1,000, we have Chabad centers there to take care of those that remain. Gaza in 1948 had 7,949 Jews. In 2023, there was 0. Today, we have a few 100,000 soldiers. Talk about moving out of communities. Let's continue this with just 2 more numbers. In 1948, there were 156,000 Arabs living in Israel. There are 2,100,000 today. 2,100,000 living in Israel as Israeli citizens, whereas every one of these countries kicked their Jews out. Jews can't live there. Israel went from 156,000 to over 2 million. And you talk about us stealing your land? There were 80,000 Arabs living in Gaza in 1948. There's over 2 million today. Who took whose land? It's propaganda. We need to educate ourselves. We need to know ourselves, our own history, so that we know what's propaganda and what's a real legitimate debate. We can't enter into debates with total falsehoods. There's nothing to debate. You want to say the hostages were well treated? There's nothing to debate. The truth is out there. There's a reason you kept spouses of hostages held hostage and you told the hostages that were released that if they speak up, watch out for your husband. That's cruelty. There was a reason why some women were selected not to be released. And sadly and tragically, we have a pretty good idea of what happened to those women and why those women were not released. Because they don't want the world to know what was done to these women. Those that picked up bodies, those holy people that went into houses and had to pick up bodies, are speaking up, and they're telling the world, and they're telling the United Nations, and they're telling anyone that wants to hear what they found done to women's bodies. Of what parts of their bodies were cut off, what parts of their bodies were shot. This is evil. This is the epitome of the word evil. And you don't negotiate with evil, and you don't try to find a way to have a ceasefire with evil. You destroy evil, or evil will keep coming back and biting you again and again and again. It's a tough war. It's not an easy war. It's tragic. Every single day we read and we see another soldier that has fallen, another IDF member that's fallen. It hurts. It's painful. There are tears in our eyes every single day. We look at the pictures of the hostages and we weep for them. But don't let that weaken our resolve that Israel must finish this job. And it's not about one political regime. It's about Israel's survival. Whether you're on the right or you're on the left, it makes no difference right now. If you want an Israel, and if you want there to be a Jewish people, then those that are bent on destroying us and wiping us off the face of the map must be destroyed first. If not, they will destroy us. It's that simple. Deuteronomy.
Can I ask one quick?
Yes.
None of these Jews who left all these lands ever talk about the right of return or getting compensated or getting paid for it either.
They're happy in their new homeland.
Yeah, but on the one hand, maybe it's good that they're not in these lands because maybe their future safety wouldn't be so good. So maybe.
Yeah, I imagine if they lived there under Saddam Hussein, it would not have been too good. And we did everything we got to get as many of the Iranian Jews out of Iran because Khomeini came to power.
Yeah.
But you're right, Gaddafi, all of these dictators would have destroyed they would have, their lives would have been threatened. Yes.
So if we want the history not to repeat itself, why we don't find what caused for this to happen?
What caused this October 7th?
Yeah.
We're going to find it.
What?
We're going to find it. I mean, we obviously, there will be investigations as to what caused it and how it came about. And they will have to learn very difficult lessons from it. Lesson number one is you can't believe that any border is safe.
But that's philosophy.
No. Actually putting troops on every single border has to be real. It can't just be we don't think that they're capable of anymore. You know, it's time we listen to the rhetoric of our enemies. And we don't dismiss it as rhetoric. When they say they want to wipe us off the map, when they say they want to throw us in the sea,
they're not our problem.
they mean it.
They're not our problem. Our problem is the left philosophy.
I don't want to get into politics right now, right or left. At this particular time in our history, we need to be united and be strong. But at the same time, we can't be weak. We made mistakes after the 6-Day War. We made those mistakes recently again. The mistakes were believing that we had things under control and lessening the amount of troops protecting particular borders. And we pay a heavy price every time we do it. I don't know how many of you have seen the recent film called Golda. It's the story of Golda Meir and the Yom Kippur War. But that does bring home literally the equation of what took place this time is the same again. A belief that you have it under control. You don't. When you have enemies that are bent on destroying you and wiping you out, you don't have it under control. And you can't rely just on a few troops. You need massive arm power. Yes?
The biggest mistake was in 2008. We had Jewish communities there.
2005. 2005, yes. I agree.
We had Jewish communities there, and they didn't want to leave, and they said the reason they didn't want to leave...
They want to protect the South.
The military would have to come in.
Right. What Jack is referring to is we had settlements in the Gaza,
Israeli soldiers physically...
and because there were Jewish settlements, the soldiers had to be there, and therefore it was protected, not just what they protected, but the south of Israel was protected. Exactly. And unfortunately, Sharon, in his desire for peace and to be loved by the world, made the error of let's take the settlements out and disengage from Gaza. Let's do an experiment if they can have their own state, and it backfires. That doesn't seem to work. Yeah?
There's been a tremendous amount of publicity about the innocent men, women, and children in Gaza that are being killed.
Yep.
And when I first started hearing these reports, I was feeling that maybe they weren't doing the right thing. That changed when I realized that the Palestinians are harboring terrorists.
Right.
And if you harbor a terrorist,
you're guilty. Yeah. When you find out that the hospital knew very clearly what was going on, that hostages were held in that hospital, and it's no longer a hospital, and it's Hamas headquarters.
Yeah.
I mean, and as I mentioned 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, Israel is fighting the most sophisticated war being fought in the history of the world in how they're targeting their missiles to exactly where they have intelligence telling them that this is a Hamas place. The fact that Hamas is going to population centers, Hamas has to be responsible for that, not Israel. And the world's got to continuously, and you have some politicians from both parties speaking up saying, hey, this is Hamas. If you want to know about 10,000 civilians, the address is Hamas, not the IDF. And we have to hear that more and more. I want to get to Deuteronomy. We've been talking about the verse that says that the Torah is given to you and that you cannot detract from it, you can't take any laws out of it, and you can't add any laws to it because it's perfection. And that led us into the conversation of the divine authorship of the Torah. When something is given to you by God, then it's perfection by its very definition. And something that's perfection, we don't mess with. We try to understand it, we try learning from it, but we don't change it. We don't delete the verses that we have a hard time with. We don't add verses that we would love to have seen in the Torah. Hey, everyone here, if you are honest, and I gave you an option, which commandments would you want deleted from the Torah? Or what would you want the Torah to say? We can all come up with our plans, right? But if the Torah is by God and God created us and God knows us, then he knows what's best for us. We can still say, I struggle with this commandment, I don't understand this commandment, why this, why that. That's all fair game. God wants that type of debate. But let's leave the Torah in its holiness, in its holy space. And what we started talking about was the fact that the Torah had prophecies written in it that only a God could have prophesied. It could not have been a guess by anyone. if someone was going to guess, that's not what they would have guessed. And the thing that we were talking about most was the very fact that the Torah talks about our survival. The Torah tells us we're going to be exiled. The Torah tells us we're going to live through difficult times. And the Torah tells us that our numbers will always remain low. Now that goes against thinking, which means if I'm to tell you that you're a nation that will be eternal, that you will always be, that you will never get wiped out, then that number will be greater than any nation on the face of the earth, because we're guaranteed survival. So here it is, the Torah is telling us the guarantee of eternal survival for this nation, which means that come the year 2023, there should be more Jews than Chinese, because we've always been. And yet the Torah tells us, the same Torah that tells us we're going to survive also says, and you will still be a small number. And you will be exiled, and you will be persecuted. Who says that? Who predicts that? Why predict that? Unless it's truth. Unless it wants, the author wants, the ones that will survive to know, this was part of the plan. But the Torah has been given to you by the author, by God, and the Torah will tell you, there's glory days to come. The same Torah that tells us we're going to be exiled from the land of Israel tells us we're going to return to the land of Israel. No one can predict that unless you know. I gave you the example, if you recall, of 100 people on the shore. 50 go in the water, 50 don't. 50 are on the sand, 50 go in the water. There's this huge wave, and that huge wave, 48 of the 50 in the water die to survive. What are you shocked at? The 50 on the seashore that didn't go in the water, you're not surprised that they survived. You expect them to survive because it's natural. If you're on the seashore, you're not in danger, you survive. Then there's this big wave and it wipes out the people. Okay, 48 died, it was a big wave. You're wondering about how did the two survive? That's your question. If the two were together with the 48, why are those two surviving? That's not something anyone can predict before. People can predict that there's going to be huge waves and people are going to die, but to be able to predict that these 50 will stay on the seashore, these 50 will survive, 48 will die in the wave. That type of sophistication in prediction no one could make. The Torah predicted which nations will make it. It tells us Ishmael will be there till the end of times. It tells us which of Abraham's children will become great nations themselves and which will just assimilate out of existence. It tells us about the Jewish people that we're going to be of that 48, but there will be survivals. We will survive, and we will blossom again, and we will grow again. There's so much of this type of prediction in the Torah that no human being would have taken the chance to write, because the one thing a false prophet doesn't want is to be proven false. So what do you do as a false prophet? You stay safe. Your prophecies, you try to keep it safe. Why? Because I don't want to be proven false. The Torah is not filled with prophecies that are safe. They're filled with prophecies that no human being would predict and would say. You think about this, we were exiled to so many different countries, to so many cultures. When you live in an environment for a few decades, for a few generations, you become them. So you become French if you're living there for 100 years, for 200 years. That becomes your food, that becomes your style, that becomes your accent. You become the place where, if that's where you live for hundreds of years, that's where you become. The Jewish people have been exiled to all different parts of the world. As I listed you countries just in the Middle East, but that's the same can be said all over the world. And we became part of that country. We started eating like them, speaking like them, sounding like them, looking like them. The fact is, a Jew from the Middle East does not necessarily look exactly the same like a Jew from Australia. We start looking the part of the nationalities where we live, where we derive. And yet, with all of this separation that we've had for thousands of years, Jewish women will light the Shabbat candles 18 minutes before sunset everywhere in the world. And all of us will eat matzah on the 14th day of the month of Nisan at night. And we'll eat it together with bitter herbs everywhere in the world. And come tomorrow night, we're going to kindle menorahs everywhere in the world. How can that be? What bonds us? What brings us together? If we don't speak the same language, we don't look the same, we don't dress the same, we have different names, the only thing is that the Torah has kept us together. That one Torah has been the source of our knowledge, of our guidance. It has the same 304,805 letters in the Torah that's found in Ethiopia, a Torah that's found in India, a Torah that's found in America, a Torah that's found in Spain. The same exact 304,805 letters. There is no similar example in human history of a people, of a nation so scattered, so different, and yet so much the same. You can find a small tribe here and a small tribe there that kept some traditions for thousands of years, but to find it on the scale of the Jewish people, there's nothing that can compare to it. That has a code of living, that has a written Torah, that has an oral Torah of thousands of pages passed on and protected, like we have protected and preserved our Torah and our oral Torah as well. But the clincher of all of this is that this was predicted. That something that you don't find anywhere in the world with any other nation was predicted in the Torah to happen to us. And like I've said over the last few weeks, I can go on and on and on with different types of examples. I'm going to give you one more, because it comes from the portion that we're studying in the book of Deuteronomy. It's coming from a chapter, the 14th chapter. We're still only on the 13th chapter. So when we get to the 14th chapter, we'll talk a lot more about it. But for the purpose of today's discussion, I want to share with you, and you don't need to have the text in front of you, so those in Zoom land or YouTube land, don't worry about not having text. I'm going to read you the text and tell you why I'm bringing down the text. In the 14th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, Moses will talk to the Jewish people about kosher. Okay, the laws of kosher. And he's going to specifically talk about what's a kosher animal. What's considered a kosher animal? Not every animal is kosher. We know in Noah's times, human being was given permission to eat animal. Okay? Noah, when he gets off the ark, is given that permission. But as far as the Jewish people, Moses is told by God at Sinai that we're going to have our own kosher diet. Moses teaches us the diet that God taught him as far as kosher. So what I'm reading to you now is text from the 14th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. I'm going to read to you 3 verses, verses 6, 7, and 8. And then I'll explain it. It'll be rather easy to understand, but then I'm going to drive home my point. So bear with me. Every animal that has a split hoof and has a hoof that's cloven into 2 sections and chews its cud among the animals that you may eat. How do you know if an animal is kosher? It needs 2 signs. Number 1, it has to have split hooves. And number 2, it has to chew its cud. Why these 2 signs? Again, when we get to chapter 14, we can talk about it. For today, just accept what I'm reading to you. It comes from the text of the Torah. Those are the 2 signs that an animal has to have in order for it to be kosher. So far, so good? You're with me? How many signs does an animal have to have in order for it to be kosher? 2. Can it have just 1 sign? It has to have how many signs? 2 signs. You're good, right? Moses goes on, verse 7. But you shall not eat of those that chew its cud, or that has split hooves. He's saying, hold it, there's an exception here. What's the exception? He says, the cloven one, the camel, the hyrax, and the hare. For they chew its cud, but do not have split hooves. They are unclean to you. Moses says, I want you to know that there is a camel, a hyrax, and a hare, these 3 animals so far, that they do chew their cud, but they don't have split hooves. So you can't eat it. In verse 8, he adds one more animal, the pig. And he says the pig, it has split hooves, but it doesn't chew its cud. So it's not kosher. You follow the 3 verses? Verse 6, it has to have 2 signs. Verse 7, 3 animals mentioned by Moses. These 3 animals, not kosher. Why are they not kosher? Because they only have 1 sign. Verse 8, the pig, not kosher. Why? Because it only has one sign. You all follow me? Here's my question. Moses was talking to smart students, just like us here in this room. The moment Moses said it must have two signs, why do I need verse 7 and verse 8? You told me the classifications. It must have two signs. If it doesn't have two signs, it's not kosher. Why did you tell me verse 7, oh, these three animals you can't eat? I know it from verse 6, because these three animals only have one sign. You already told me in the prior verse, if it has one sign, it's not good. Why didn't you tell me verse 8 about the pig, that it only has one sign? I know it from verse 6. Is there any reason we would think that the pig was kosher if it just told us verse 6? Remember, it has to have two signs. Well, we'll check out the pig. We'll see that the pig doesn't chew its cud, so guess what? It's on the off list. No pig for you. Why verse 7, verse 8? You're making it very clear, Moses. Chew its cud, has split hoofs. And then you told me about these four animals. The camel, the hyrax, this rabbit, and this pig. And you specify these four, don't eat them because they only have one. Why list it? If you're going to give me the general rule is enough for me. You don't have to start giving me specifics. And that's the point I want to make for you today. Again, as far as learning about kosher, when we get to chapter 14 in the winter semester, we'll talk more about it. Why split hooves and chew its cud? Chapter 14 when we get to it. I want to focus on why does he have to give us verse 7 and verse 8? Since the day this was written, there has never been found on planet Earth a single animal other than those four that have one sign. It has never been found. You want to go with this theory that a man wrote this book? When? Which man? You got to back it up with something. There is no way any human being on the face of the earth on any time of history would have known about 7 or 8 million species of animals that are on the face of the earth. The only one that would know every species of animal on the face of the earth is the creator of every species of animal. This is just one additional place in the Torah where the author is saying, if you want to find me, you can find me. Because I'm sharing information with you that no human being could possibly have known. If Moses made this up himself, if Moses is the author of the Bible, there is no way Moses could know that these four animals are the only four animals to spell out as only having one of the two signs. The reason Moses is telling us about those four animals, yes, we would know that they're not kosher on our own because we know from verse 6, he's telling it to us to prove that he's getting this information from the creator of every species of animal that will know that in the history of the world, you will never find another animal that either chews its cud but doesn't have split hooves or has split hooves and doesn't chew its cud, but the four animals that are listed. Yeah.
You mentioned the hyrax. A lot of people don't know what a hyrax is, but it's a small mammal.
Yep.
It's found in abundance on Table Mountain in Cape Town.
I was on Table Mountain in Cape Town.
Did you see the hyrax?
I didn't know to look for it. I should go back. I should go back and look for it. Is it not like a woodchuck of some type?
No, it's related to the elephant, believe it or not.
Oh, I saw a lot of baboons in South Africa, but not on Table Mountain. Yes?
Rabbi, you didn't answer the questions. Why would God, and you tell us that God is so concise, he doesn't waste a letter. Why would he waste 2 lines?
To put his signature in the book, to let those that want to find him. He drops these hints all throughout by telling us, again, we get to this verse that Jacob buried Rachel on the way in Bethlehem, right? So far so good. There's an added part to that verse, and that spot is known till this very day. Who puts that in? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was fortunate enough in 2006 to go to Rabbi Bryski to Israel, and we got that exact spot. He pulled the bus over, and he pulled out his Chumash, and he read that line at that spot.
Right.
It wasn't to this day, but it was 17 years ago.
And now you can pull it out to this day. It does that, again, the author is hiding his identity for anyone that wants to find him. You want to find me? I'll show it to you. And that's why we were talking a few weeks ago, if you remember, Jack, we were talking about codes. That there are codes in the Bible, number jumps, things. There's so much there that would not have been discovered for thousands of years after the Bible was written, but God pre-planted it into the Bible, that the day will come that you will have these most sophisticated computers, and you'll be able to find the signature of the author. Just like an author signs and autographs his book, God put his author, his signature in the book, if you want to look for it. Those that want to find him just need to be honest and open your eyes. Be honest with truth. Those that prefer not to, do so, because it's easier. It's easier to just accept the notion of, no, it's not from God. Because if it's not from God, it's not binding on me. It's someone's opinion, it's philosophy, it's a great author. I pick up this book, I pick up Shakespeare. This day I'm in the mood of Shakespeare, this way I'm in the mood of Bible. There's a consequence to coming to a conclusion that God wrote this book, and it's not necessarily a consequence everyone is ready to accept. But if you want to be open and you want to be honest with yourself, go after truth. Find truth. Now we have to deal with the issues. There are issues with the truth. It's okay to ask, okay, God wrote it, but is it still relevant? How do I know it's still relevant? That's a fair discussion to have. It's okay to say, I now believe that the Torah was authored by God, but what about the oral Torah? How do I know the transmission of the details was passed on correctly? It's a fair discussion to have. It's okay to say the truth. I wasn't raised with it. My parents didn't teach this to me. It's very hard midlife to suddenly make these types of changes. It's a fair discussion to have. It's okay to say a change in lifestyle that drastic it's too much for the system. How do I deal with that? These are fair discussions to have. And it's all with honesty. A person can be honest to say, I accept that the Torah was written by God, but what am I supposed to do now? It's fair. And that's what our job is. To walk you through it, one step at a time, one answer at a time, one discussion at a time, with your free choice to choose what you're ready for, what you're not ready for, what you're prepared to accept, what you're not prepared to accept, as long as we're having an open, honest conversation. But to simply dismiss it and say, it was written. I remember when I first came out, I was quite young. I came out exactly 40 years ago this month. And I was invited to a Chavurah group in Ventura. And I had prepared a talk. It was my first public speech. I prepared a talk to give, and it was sometime before Shavuot, I believe, and I talked about Sinai, Revelation, and stuff, and then there was time for questions. And some people were asking me questions, and then one woman, I still remember this, picks up her hand, but she's not addressing the question to me. She's addressing the question to the organizer of the Chavurah group. She's asking her a question. And her question was, do we believe what he just said? And she doesn't know what to say. She invited me. What should she say? So she says, no, it's just a Chabad thing. And I couldn't let that go. And I said, Chabad? What does Chabad got to do with Revelation at Sinai? You think we made that up? Chabad's only been here since like the 1700s. We made up the Revelation. It's on our book. It's on our manual. It's a Chabad thing. It's a Jewish thing. It doesn't belong to the Orthodox. It doesn't belong to the Reform, to the Conservative, to the Reconstructionist, to Chabad. It doesn't belong to Hasidim or Misnagdim. Revelation belongs to all of us. It's ours. God spoke to all of us, to our parents, to our grandparents. You got to fill in the lines, the details. If you want to say it's made up, fill it in. Tell me how, who could make up a book of lies and sell it to a people that have always been a smart people? We're not gullible people. Our parents weren't gullible. Our grandparents weren't stupid. They couldn't sell them on something that wasn't true. Every one of yours, and yours, those in the room and those listening to me anywhere in the world, your great-grandmother lit Shabbos candles. Your great-grandfather observed the Torah. He wasn't stupid. No one could sell him anything. They all did it. Why? Because it was passed on from their grandparents and their grandparents, and at some point it was at Sinai. Be honest. I can't do it. It's too hard for me. Oral Torah, all these other excuses I said, all legitimate. To have discussions. There's responses to each, but we're having a legitimate discussion. But to simply say, it was made up by the rabbis. And the rabbis, what? They sold it to all of us? Really, a board of rabbis, imagine this, a board of rabbis come out and give you 613 restrictions. And we're all going to embrace it. And we say, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Who in the world thinks we wanted to accept these rules? Guess what? We got a new one for you. From now on, we're only going to eat in kosher restaurants. Oh, yay, that's wonderful. Let's do it. From now on Shabbat, we can only do this. Oh, yeah, let's do that. From now on, you can only have sex with your spouse during a period of time of the month, but not the other times. Oh, sure, let's do that. Come on. What do you think your grandparents were? They were just as smart as us, if not smarter. The only reason this has been part of Jewish tradition for thousands of years and part of giving it over from one generation to the next is because it's true. And as like I said, I showed you just simple examples where the author puts his signature there. You're struggling with it? Hey, so am I. We all struggle with it. We're all honest. There's commandments that are easier, commandments that are more difficult. But if we start from an honest place, we can make a lot of progress. We'll continue with this next week. Next week will be the last class for the fall semester. We'll take a break. We'll be back for the winter semester. Next week will also be Hanukkah. So we'll have to talk to Mira about getting some latkes and donuts here for lunch next week. Anyway, happy Hanukkah. I hope to see you at City Hall tomorrow and throughout the Hanukkah celebrations going on in our community.